Believe it or not, the high school football season has reached the halfway mark. We're going to be talking today about shot clocks in boys basketball, about the mercy rule in soccer, should there be one, and more cross-country talk. The big Bob Furman drew a record crowd of runners, over 3,600. All that's coming up. That's right. It's another Wednesday afternoon, and it's another Fanfare High School Extra. Hi, everybody. Wayne DeZu back along with Dave Burnett. And Dave, the more I get into this show, the more I realize just how much there is to talk about every week at this time about what happened last week and what's coming up this weekend in high school sports.
Yeah, you just get into Southern Idaho and all the different sports that are taking place. I mean, the focus always on football. That's kind of the big dog. But all of those other sports that are out there that kids are involved in, both the guys and gals, there's a lot of sports, there's a lot of parents, a lot of coaches, a lot of people involved and very active. You're not even talking about the Optimist-sized schools. You're just talking about schools themselves, high schools. There's a lot of sports out
And
there.
a couple of subjects today we'll talk about a little later on that can kind of get opinions. We're talking about, should there be a mercy rule in soccer? I mean, when you've got teams winning 10-0, should it be called? And the other thing we'll talk about is the shot clock in boys basketball. They wanted to experiment with it. They said no. We'll talk about why that all came down. But first, let's talk about football and what happened last week. And, of course, Capital maintaining a 4-1 record with a victory, and Eagle at 5-0, the only undefeated team in 5A SIC.
Yep, and that was the very first one of the first games of the season. I guess maybe week 2 was Capital and Eagle, where Capital ran out to that big first lead half, and then the wheels came off the car. Eagle came back and beat them, and I think Capital's probably kicking themselves for that. But you know, you have those two teams who have really risen to the top as the best in the Southern Conference here in the 5A. So, you know, two big games out there, but a lot of other games out there as well to talk about. We did the game with Timberline and Valley View on Friday night. I thought it'd be a little more, Mountain View. One of the views, and it was one of the views there, Mountain View and Valley View. And I thought it'd be a little more competitive, but Mountain View running away with that one.
Yeah, they did. Mountain View looked very good in that one. And now the other game we talked about that night was the fact that Highland and Coeur d'Alene were playing up in Coeur d'Alene. Highland won that game.
Yep.
And you've got the ratings now, which put Highland number 1. And, hey, they were 1-2 last week, so they beat,
Yep.
Highland beat Coeur d'Alene. They should be number 1.
Highland now standing at 5-0. They got 9 first-place votes. There's 10 voters that vote. 9 of those first-place votes went to Highland. Coeur d'Alene comes in second with 1 loss. You would think Eagle would have jumped up into that second spot, but somewhere they have Coeur d'Alene finishing second. Eagle was number 3 in the state. Capital is number 4 at 4-1. Lake City 4-1. And then one kind of bizarre vote, Nampa received a vote.
Nampa's 3-2, and that's great, all good and well.
Yeah,
but
moving from 4A to 5A,
right,
that's
but
good.
Mountain View, and I am not, being a Mountain View fan here, but they are also 3-2. And when you go to head-to-head competition, Mountain View clobbered Nampa the first game of the season. So reality is, if you're going to throw a vote out there and you got 2 3-2 teams, go with the one that won.
Or
just thinking.
Timberline's only got 1 loss.
Yeah, that's true. You got Timberline out there, and I forgot about that. Timberline sitting out there with that 1 loss.
So. Yeah, so kind of interesting. But Nampa picking up a vote, so good for them, I guess. In the 4A category, first-place votes, Blackfoot coming in number 1. They got 6 first-place votes. Bishop Kelly's number 2. They got 3 first-place votes there. It was Kuna number 3, Middleton number 4, and Lakeland number 5. So Bishop Kelly up there challenging Blackfoot for that number 1 spot in the 4A.
Well, in the standings right now in 5A SIC Pod A, Capital leading it at 4-1 and Timberline at 4-1. They are tied for the pod lead. Although when they take it down into pod competition, okay, that's the overall. Capital has a 1-0 record and Timberline 0-1. So a big game coming up Friday night. We'll talk more about that coming up later tonight. But that game is going to be right here on 6:30 The Fan. Timberline Capital over DLP.
Yep, and
I feel so cool when I call it DLP.
DLP.
Just DL, yeah.
Down on the DLP.
DLP.
Donald Larson Park for us that aren't sure what the DLP is. So right down here, right off Broadway, which is the college facility.
Beautiful facility.
For high school, and we will be out there again on Friday night. We'll be streaming that game, getting that streaming thing processed down. It's taken us a few games to get it, but to where have great clarity and the sound good.
Yeah, it looked good last week.
You can also get back. It'll be up later this afternoon. Last week's game will be posted at 630thefan.com, so you'll be able to watch. If you didn't get to see the Valley View game with Mountain View, you got a chance to watch that streaming online. We'll have that up later today.
See, it's halfway through the season. It's all coming together now, so we're right on schedule, you and me.
Well, nobody said as quick at anything, so it's high tech, and it's it's been there. but it's getting better every week.
All right, last week, go back to last week. It all started on a Thursday night with Capital beating Bora 42-0. Not surprised that Capital put up 42, but kind of surprised that Bora put up nothing.
Yeah, Bora, and we've seen them earlier in the season. They were okay. They looked like a solid team. But Capital perhaps on a mission there and making a statement against the Lions.
We'll talk with Todd Simas later on in this show, and Todd talks about just how important that loss to Eagle was. They were up 23-0, if you recall, and then just kind of fell apart. Mm-hmm. And he said it really hurt, and he'll talk about how much life's lessons the kids learned from that loss there. All right, then on Friday night, Meridian and Boise turned out to be the game of the night. Who would have thunk it, huh?
Yep,
31-28, Meridian wins it.
Very close game, competitive all the way to the end. So, good for both of those teams. Boise obviously a little disappointed with the outcome on that, but nonetheless.
Napa, who got that vote, they beat Centennial. Poor Centennial. They are just struggling right now. 31-22 is the final. Yep. Putting some points on the board, but Centennial still looking for their first win. They're 0-5 overall, 0-1 in league.
They have homecoming this weekend, and they're hoping this will be it. I was talking to one of the parents of a player on the team. They said they're hoping for this weekend because otherwise it may be a winless season for Centennial.
Well, and you mentioned homecoming. They're hosting Bora at Centennial this weekend, and, of course, Bora coming off that 42-0 debacle against Capital. Centennial still looking for the first win. So you've got two, I think I would dare to say, desperate teams.
Yeah, I mean, Bora wants to come back and say, you know what, we are better than that, and we've seen them. They're not a bad team. Centennial could have their hands full.
Eagle 5-0. They beat Columbia 57-13. No surprise there last Friday. Other finals, Mountain View, the game we did, 52-7 over Valley View. And you know what, Dave, we did that game because both teams were coming into that game at 3-1. Both teams were coming off good victories, and it really appeared to me that it was going to be a competitive game. And Mountain View just got off to an 18-0 start, and it was all over.
Yep, it went downhill from there. Lane Coffin with the offense he runs. It's a run-based offense. Once you're down 18-0, you're in trouble because then you're forced to pass, and they just don't have that big a passing attack.
And then, of course, it was Rocky Mountain beating Timberline. In the final, there was 36-16. Timberline's first loss, but now going to try to bounce back against Capital. And, again, we'll talk about that game coming up.
All right. It is the Sports Extra, and once again, want to thank our sponsors. It's a Champions Club. We get together, folks like Pro Image in there, Boise Muffler, MyBullfrog.com, Satellite Systems who are stepping up.
Yep, Mountain West Bank.
And we want to thank them for their sponsorship of the Sports Extra and, of course, being members of the Champion Club. And if you'd like more information, you can contact Wayne DeZubak or contact myself, Dave Burnett. In fact, you can do that at dave.burnett@townsquaremedia.com, and we'll get you hooked up as a business as to how to support these kids. We're going to be continuing to do this through basketball and some of the spring sports as well.
And a lot of fun things to talk about. It's not, we always start with football right now, but obviously a little bit later on in the show, I've got some thoughts on a mercy rule in soccer because there's been a lot of lopsided scores this year. And also, how about that cross-country meet? I told everybody, don't go by Eagle Island State Park because you're going to get stuck in traffic. Well, guess what I did Saturday?
You went by there.
I went right by there, and I got stuck in traffic.
Well,
3,700 runners.
That's a lot of runners, a lot of families, and just a great event that took place over the weekend in some kind of iffy weather, but it didn't affect the runners. They were
and the thing of it is, Mountain View and Rocky Mountain weren't there. They're cross-country teams, and I'll tell you why a little later on in the show.
In fact, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with more. This is your High School Extra right here on Sports Radio 630, The Fan.
We are back. It's Fanfare High School Extra right here on 630 The Fan. Wayne DeZubak along with Dave Burnett. We're talking a lot of different things tonight. We're going to continue on the football vein, but coming up, we'll talk about the shot clock in basketball. We'll talk about maybe a mercy rule in soccer. People are talking about that. Should there be one? All of that coming up. But, Dave, let's talk about, let me just go through. We did not touch on 4C real quick, so let me do this quickly. CUNA 5-0 overall. Bishop Kelly and Middleton both 4-1, okay? And as far as the conference standings go, CUNA, BK, Middleton, all 1-0 right now in 4A. And coming up this week, BK is going to be at Caldwell, CUNA at Skyview, and Middleton is at Mountain Home.
You know, I've had several emails coming in, which you can do that, dave.burnett@townsquaremedia.com, saying, could you cover some 4A football? So we might take a look at that here in the next couple of weeks coming up, maybe get out to one of the better 4A games.
Well, what we try to do is cover the best game of the week. And if it happens to be a 4A game, and if we get one of those nice matchups, like you say, a juicy matchup, I have no problem. They're fun. It'd be fun to go out to a Middleton or someplace like that and do a football game. And then matter of fact, we talked yesterday, we're kind of eyeballing and to see how things lay out and what they do. But we try to take it week by week before we make a decision where to go.
Because we want to call what we feel may be one of the better games or one of the more pertinent games when it comes to the end of the season, which now is on the front end of the car as we're headed that way.
And this week we're over to Donald Larson Park. We're going to be doing Capital and Timberline. Both teams are 4-1, and the thing of it is Timberline got off to a great 4-0 start. In talking with Todd Simmons, the head coach over at Capital, he says that Timberline's got a much more physical team than they have in years.
Yeah, I mean, they got the one loss last week, which a little bit of a surprise that they got beat so bad. But we'll see how they regroup and come back against Capital.
Well, and that's the thing, talking about regrouping, I'm glad you brought that up, because Todd Simmons is talking about the fact that ever since they lost in game week 2 to Eagle, they were up, Capital was 23-0 over at Mustang Stadium, or Thunder Stadium, the home of the Mustangs, and all of a sudden it turned around on a dime. And we talked about it. Josh Labrador intercepted a pass, ran it back 85 yards, and boom, the momentum was gone. But Todd Simmons told me the other day, he said, boy, Capital learned more from that loss than he did from any win he's ever been around. Here's what he had to say about how much better Capital is now since they lost to Eagle.
Our kids were so upset, and I think it was turned into a positive, and they were so determined to not let that happen again. I think the last 3 games we've outscored our opponents 150-14, or it sounds crazy, but the hurt from that loss, to be in command of that game and to let it get away, I think sharpened us a little bit, and they came back Monday ready to go. And I've been really proud of where we've, in the last 3 weeks, how much better we've gotten.
Todd Simmons, the head coach of Capital, talking about how much they learned from that loss way back to Eagle and how well they're playing right now as they get ready for Timberline Friday night.
And maybe you might want to take that lesson and instill it in the Boise State Bronco program right now.
They need it.
They go to Air Force and lay a big egg over at Air Force at the academy. Take that loss, regroup, and re-examine yourself. And really, that's where for sports, and whether you're talking volleyball, soccer, football, for kids in high school, that's where they learn how to deal with adversity in life. It truly is not only just a sports lesson, it's a life lesson for these kids to realize, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And once you get punched in the face, what do you do with it? And it appears the guys on Capital, they have put it back together to say, you know what? We're not going to let this set us back. We're going to go forward and be better for it.
And nobody likes a bad loser. Nobody likes a bad winner. And I mean, it takes an attitude to be a good winner. And it takes an attitude to be a good loser, because nobody likes to lose. But you have to you're a good loser when you learn something from that loss and take away from it and become better at what you're doing.
Yeah, as you look at a lot of these different programs, I look at Centennial, one that's been a power over the years and so far struggling to find that first win. Now, on one surface you can go, man, I feel bad for those kids, they haven't even won a game yet. But even through that adversity, they are learning some lessons week to week how to persevere, because at this point, it's perseverance and just trying to personally get better week after week. If you do that, you'll develop as a young man or woman.
Well, and you got to remember that Centennial right now going through a coaching change. I mean, they had Lee Newman for 104 years?
At least.
And, Lee was there and he had a system down. He had it going. Now you've got a new coach in there. And you're trying to change the system, trying to get kids used to it, trying to get different ideas. And there's always that transitional state. And right now, they're getting closer every week, but they're there. And sometimes when you lose, it becomes a habit. And that's why you got to sit down, kind of revamp everything and say, okay, we just got to change this somewhere.
Yeah, and to bring it full circle, Timberline is in that position this week. They were high on the hog, going undefeated, and now they get beaten badly last week by Rocky Mountain. What did they do? How did they regroup, and how do they come forward in the game?
All right, we got a big Thursday night schedule tomorrow night. We've got 3 games on tap for Thursday, October 2nd. Eagle at Boise at Donald Larson Park, Columbia at Valley View, and Rocky Mountain's going to play at Napa. So that's about as busy a Thursday night schedule as I've seen in a while.
I think it is. It's a very busy schedule. In fact, I don't think I've seen, unless Boise State were playing on a Friday, which they're not.
No.
But I think that's as busy a Thursday schedule.
With that in mind, Centennial has rescheduled 2 of their games. They've rescheduled the games for October 17th and October 24th because Boise State plays Fresno and BYU respectively on those Friday nights. So those games for Centennial have been moved to Thursday in the middle of October 17th and October 24th. That's a good move to get away from going up against Boise State because those games are scheduled for down here at Donald Larson Park.
It did just dawn on me why some of these schools have moved them to Thursdays. It's teacher and service training days coming up. So that's probably the reason why they moved some of
What?
those
So
games to
teachers get a
Thursday.
day off and we have to move a football game?
I don't know.
Come on, Dave. We got to keep our priorities straight here.
I'm just trying to come up with a reason as to why somebody moved to
You don't have
Thursday
to
night.
Come up with a reason. Hey, let's get off football for a minute. Talk about basketball because that's down the road. Believe it or not, Boise State opens up basketball practice, this week, and we're not talking. So basketball really is around the corner, but high school basketball down the stretch.
And it's not that far off.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of open gyms going on right now where players get in and work out on their own. So
Centennial wanted during their holiday tournament to try and experiment with a shot clock, a 35-second shot clock.
Yep.
The High School Activities Association turned it down in part and largely because the national organization said that, well, if you do that and you experiment with this, even at a holiday tournament, you might lose your national vote on rules changes. So they didn't want to do that. So they are not going to use the shot clock. But, Dave, I feel that's sad because I think the shot clock is exactly what high school basketball needs.
I think so, too. It makes it a faster paced, a more exciting game with a lot of action in it. And sometimes the attendance at high school basketball is down a bit. And I think in part it's the pacing of it. Some of the teams, if they're up against a good team, will slow the game down to where it really becomes a drag. So, Ty Jones, I understand why the Activities Association took the stance they did. They kind of had their hand forced
Right.
to say no on it, but it would have been exciting to watch and see and to watch how the kids adapted to a shot clock.
What they said was Ty Jones was saying that they really actually had a better chance if they were trying to go and make this change statewide rather than just for that holiday tournament, that they might have had a better opportunity to make that happen. I think it's ultimately going to happen, that they're going to go to the shot clock because sometimes high school basketball, especially towards the end when there's a 10-point lead, you get down to trying to protect the win rather than trying to kind of add to the victory or whatever the case may be. And as a result, the other team that's down feels like there's no chance we can get back in this.
I find it fascinating, though, that the national level would say, no, you lose your chance to vote. You would think, since it's a tournament, since it's non-conference, that it would be better to try it to see how it worked, because that way you could come back and say, no, it doesn't work at all, bad idea. Or you could say, this is a great idea.
Part of the problem, I think, is that only 7 states in the country use the shot clock in high school basketball. So it's something that hasn't really caught on and has this grand sweep of change. So maybe they just want to hold on to what has been steady Eddie. But I do think it's going to come. I really do think it's going to
I would think so.
One other basketball note I wanted to throw out there is that Destiny Slocum, who's a Mountain View point guard, she has signed late Monday night. She announced she's going to sign and play at the University of Washington. She had been thinking about Duke, UCLA, or Oregon.
And she had more offers than that.
Yeah, not only is Destiny good at basketball, but she's thinking about Duke. She's got to be pretty darn smart.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so. Yeah, she had a ton of offers. Those are just the ones she was thinking about.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the mailbox at her house and the emails that would be flooding in? So good for Destiny, and going to get on the national
That'll
stage.
be fun for her.
Going to take a quick break. It is High School Extra here. When we come back, going to be talking about soccer and volleyball as we continue. And don't forget Nate Kruckman and This Week in the Mountain West coming up at the bottom of the hour here on Sports Radio 630, The Fan.
It's high school sports all the time right here on 630 The Fan. Hi again, everybody. Wayne DeZu back with Dave Burnett, and you are listening to Fanfare High School Extra. And let's just kind of wrap up the cross-country thing, because the Bob Furman was on Saturday at Eagle Island State Park, Dave. 3,600 runners. They had like 130 teams here.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's not only good for the sport, good for the economy in Eagle. There's a lot of restaurants very busy on Saturday.
What's really interesting, you think about, cross-country, and kids are really getting an opportunity. For instance, the Mountain View runners took off. They took 4th in Minnesota. They went to the University of Minnesota to compete with people over there. So Mountain View went there. Meanwhile, it was Capital and Rocky Mountain headed over to Portland. They competed in a Nike tournament up there. So you had all these runners in Portland. You have them in Minnesota. You had all these people coming in from like 7 states, 130 teams or something like that to compete at the Bob Furman. So it was a big weekend for cross country.
It was. On Saturday, we were at an event and driving back, and I told my wife we weren't too far from there, and all these kids out just running on the side of the road with numbers on, and I said, and they were just out warming up and running. They weren't in competition at the time. I said, man, they are a long ways from the park, from Eagle Island. They got a long ways to run back just on warming up. I'd be dead.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing. That's why I never got into cross country, because they warm up for 62 miles, and then they go and they run the cross country course,
Yeah.
5K or whatever it is. I don't even know exactly how long a cross country course is, but bottom line is, yeah, they warm up too much for me.
Yeah, and then they go home and run for fun.
Yeah,
It's like, wow.
Yeah, it's like they never entered this mentality. You know what I'm saying?
And funny is you never see a cross country runner with my physique. It just doesn't happen. It's just kind of funny how
Those
that
two
works.
things kind of go together, don't they?
But for all the cross country runners out there, congratulations, and those who put the event on. Just a great event and a great job done.
What do you have there? You got something for me? Or
Well, I was just taking a look at some of the soccer action going
Yeah.
on as we had.
I didn't know what you had there. You had that
Oh, yeah.
paper, and you looked like you were ready to say something.
No, I was just holding it, looking at the soccer action and looking at the boys' soccer as Centennial continues to look very good.
Oh, yeah.
8 victories, no losses, and 1 tie.
Yeah, and they're 12-0-2 overall, so that's just in league play with the 8 victories.
Yep.
They're doing great. Centennial beat Eagle last night 6-2, looking strong. And on the girls' side, Boise remains undefeated. Boise beat Columbia 3-0 the other day, so Boise now just sitting right there at 13-0-1. They've still got some, they've still got Rocky Mountain there. Eagles still looking good on the girls' side, but Centennial right now Bohr is right behind him in the standings at 7-0-2 and 11-1-2 overall. But Centennial looking like the class, of boys soccer.
I was just thinking, as you opened up the show, you mentioned the fact that in soccer they were talking about a mercy rule.
Yeah.
And I've got my feelings on it, but explain a little bit what would
Well, the
happen
bottom
here.
line is there's a mercy rule in football. There's a mercy rule in some other sports and things like that. I actually went to the only girls' game I've been to this year was right at the beginning of the season, and Rocky Mount was hosting Nampa. And the final score was 15-0 Rocky. And I was sitting there going, okay, don't score anymore. Stop. Don't shoot the ball. But, so we had 15-0. I mean, I think it was Monday night, let's see. Yeah, it was Boise 10, Columbia nothing in varsity girls soccer. So you got to ask yourself, especially in soccer, where a 1-0 game or a 2-0 game could mean, we were out of it. We lost 2-0.
Insurmountable.
Yeah, insurmountable. We were down 2-0. No way we could come back. Should there be a mercy rule?
My opinion is no. And for the same reason, I think in football, don't ask players not to play hard when you get your second and your third string in there if you're winning by, 30 points. Because for those players to get that opportunity to compete in real competition, it's just invaluable for them. So if you have, a gal or a gal's team or a guy's team and they're ahead by 8 points, if you're the coach, you put the substitutes in, let them get that game action, and don't ask them not to play hard. Don't ask them not to compete at their top level. Does it seem a little unmerciful? Perhaps, but I don't think you can take a kid who's learning how to do it and working at it to then go, don't really try very hard.
Got to look at it from both sides. On the side of the team that's winning, okay, if you've got a good coach, the coach is going to say, okay, let's do this. Let's have 10 touches before you guys shoot. Let's kind of look around. Let's pass it around. You're going to intermix your team a little bit. You're going to take, these guys that are like never playing that much and put them in there and go there.
Yep.
On the other side of the ball, if you're losing, if you're down 15-0, you still have to learn how to finish, whether it's a 1-0 game or 15-0. You've got to learn how to finish and fight all the way to the end and make something happen. And you just got to reset your goals. And at that point, my goal would have been, okay, let's just score once. Let's get something in the net.
Yeah, and that really does come down to coaching and coaches dealing with the kids who are playing and working with their mindset so that if you're ahead 10 or 12-0, that those kids are not rubbing in the face of the team they're playing. Sometimes difficult, I'll admit, when you're doing very well, difficult not to do that. But I think a mercy rule, just not a good idea in competitive high school sports. Optimist, PAL soccer, that may be a whole different story. But when it comes to high school, once they hit middle school, high school, learn how to compete, learn how to finish, learn how to be a good winner, and learn how to be a good loser.
Yeah, sometimes I worry about everybody gets a trophy kind of attitude.
Exactly.
That's not the way life works.
It doesn't. Sometimes you get it handed to you, and you have to learn how to deal with that.
You know what? We've had so much fun here. I think we're about out of time, big guy.
We are, but I do want to remind you that coming up Friday night, 6:30, will be our pregame show, and we will be at Donald Larson Park, or as Wayne likes to say, DLP. And
I like to say DLP. Got to say it cool.
Is that it?
DLP.
I'll put my hat on backwards and say it that way. So we'll see you there at 6:30, and of course streaming online at 630thefan.com. It is High School Extra. I'm Dave Burnett. He's Wayne DeZubak. Nate Kreckman with This Week in the Mountain West next on Sports Radio 630, The Fan.